My name is Alara Quinn, and I used to believe that family meant safety. I was wrong. The morning it happened, I was setting the table when the sirens stopped outside our house. 2 officers knocked, their faces hard. "Alara Quinn?" one asked. My hands shook as I nodded. Mom gasped. My sister, Clara, froze in the doorway. They said I was under arrest for fraud, something about stolen company funds. I laughed because it sounded insane. But when they cuffed me, Clara didn't speak. I begged her to tell them I was innocent. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. The world blurred as they led me to the car. Through the glass, I saw her holding Mom, whispering something. The look in her eyes wasn't sorrow, it was relief. For a second I saw her smirk, small but real. That image burned itself into me. As the police drove away, my chest felt hollow. I didn't know what I had done, but deep inside a quiet voice whispered, "Clara knows." The trial came fast, like a storm. Every witness, every document pointed to me. My lawyer said the evidence was too clean. Someone had built this case perfectly. Then Clara took the stand. I thought she'd defend me, she was my sister, my best friend. But instead she told the court she'd seen me working late on her laptop, that I'd been acting secretive. Her voice cracked just enough to sound believable. I watched my parents shrink in their seats. They looked at me like I was a stranger. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, my ears rang. Clara cried loudly as if mourning me, but her eyes stayed dry. The judge said 5 years. I remember thinking, 5 years for something I didn't even understand. When the guards took my hands, I turned back one last time. Clara mouthed, "I'm sorry." But her lips twitched like she was holding back a smile. Prison was another world. The air smelled of metal and hopelessness. Nights were the hardest, cold walls, louder thoughts. I counted each day, waiting for a letter or a visit, but none came for months. Then one night, a woman named Tessa sat beside me in the cafeteria. She said, "You don't belong here." I laughed bitterly. "That's what guilty people say." She shook her head. "I worked at FinTech Systems, the company you robbed. Your sister used to come there a lot with Nathan Hale." My spoon froze midair. Nathan Hale. I had never met him, but I'd heard the name during the trial. "What do you mean she came there?" I asked. Tessa leaned closer. "She was always with Nathan. Right before the money disappeared." Her words sank into me like ice. Clara had never mentioned any of this. That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time I started to wonder if my sister had done something terrible. Weeks later I got my first letter. The handwriting was neat, Clara's. She said she missed me and that she wished she could take it all back. The words felt cold, rehearsed, like she was writing to clear her conscience. Near the end she mentioned Nathan again, calling him a close friend who's been through a lot. My chest tightened. Why would she write about him now? I folded the letter, reading it over and over. When I replied, I pretended to forgive her. I wrote that I was healing and at peace, hoping she'd keep writing and slip up. 2 weeks later, another letter came. She wrote that Nathan had found a new job overseas and that things were finally good again. My stomach churned. Good? How could anything be good when my life was gone? That night, I pressed my forehead to the cold wall and whispered, "What did you do, Clara?" 3 years passed. I thought I'd forgotten how to cry until the night a new inmate arrived. Her name was Marla, older, sharp-eyed, and quiet. When she learned my name, she froze. "You're Clara's sister," she said. My pulse quickened. "You know her?" She nodded slowly. "I used to manage accounts at FinTech. Your sister and that man, Nathan, they were the real thieves. Everyone in the company knew. But your name was on the papers. They said your father made it disappear." My legs went weak. "You're lying," I whispered, but she wasn't. Her eyes were full of pity. "Your father paid them to keep Clara's name out of it." I felt my world collapse all over again. My family had traded my freedom to protect her. That night I made a silent promise to myself. If I ever walked free again, I wouldn't rest until they all paid for what they'd done. When the guard slid the envelope under my cell door, my hands trembled so much the paper bent. Inside were photos, Clara laughing at a bar with Nathan, a receipt from a hotel, a check with her name on it. Someone had taped them together with a note, "They thought you wouldn't see." My stomach dropped. Who had sent this? I held the pictures to the light, searching for clues. There was a small stamp from a print shop I didn't recognize. That night I asked Marla about it. She looked at the photos and then at me. "Your mother used to go to that print shop," she said slowly. She made a lot of things go away for money. My world tilted. If Mom had helped, then this was bigger than Clara or Nathan. It was our whole family. I had always trusted them. I lay awake thinking about every small moment that had felt wrong, the hidden phone, the hushes in the hallway. How many times had they chosen Clara over me? The thought of my father making deals to protect her made bile rise in my throat. I folded the photos and hid them in my mattress. I told no one. Later, a guard who liked me tapped on the bars and whispered, "Be careful. Someone's watching you." I looked toward the small window and saw a shadow move across the yard. A week after the envelope, a guard slipped me a different note with one line, "Ask your father." The handwriting looked shaky, like someone old or scared. I had not spoken to Dad since the trial. He came once, eyes hollow, and said nothing. Now, with those photos and the note, I felt like a trapped animal with a path out. I wrote to the warden, asking for a meeting with my family. They were surprised but agreed. They wanted to look like they cared. Dad sat across from me in the visitor's room. His hands were folded, his face pale. I asked him directly about Nathan and the print shop. He blinked, then said, "We tried to help both of you." I remembered all the nights he left early and came back smelling of perfume and cigarette smoke. "Did you pay them to put my name on the papers?" I asked. He swallowed hard and said, "We did what we thought would save the family." The words cracked like ice. "Save Clara," I said. He looked at me with raw shame. "We were scared she'd destroy everything." My heart hammered. I wanted to leap across the table and shake him. Instead, I stayed calm. "Who sent the photos?" I whispered. Dad's throat moved and he said, "Your mother." I felt like someone had pushed me into deep water. When I left prison after good behavior, the world smelled different, loud and bright and mean. Freedom tasted like metal and regret. I walked to the bus stop with a small bag and one clear plan: find Nathan and the print shop and then find Clara. My parents met me at the house. Mom hugged me like she had never let go, but her eyes were tired and broken. Dad kept his distance. I pretended to be okay. Inside, I was a volcano waiting to burst. That night I found the print shop address in the photos. It was a small place 2 towns over, run down and nervous. I drove there the next day and told the owner I was looking for old records. He squinted at me, then at my face. "You're a Lara Quinn," he said slowly. My pulse thudded. He showed me a logbook with a faded stamp, "Quinn Family Payments." There were dates, amounts, and the name of a lawyer who had handled payments. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the page. "Why?" I asked. The man shrugged. "Money makes people look the other way." I left with a list of names. At the bottom was Nathan Hale's old address. When I drove there, the house was empty, an abandoned car in the driveway and a welcome mat that had seen better days. A single cigarette but lay on the porch. I picked it up and smelled the ash. My chest tightened. I tracked Nathan to a rundown motel on the edge of town. The clerk remembered him and said he left suddenly a year ago with no forwarding address. A neighbor told me Nathan liked the river and walked there at night to think. I found the riverbank as the sun set, the water orange and loud. I sat and waited, hands numb, repeating names in my head. After a long time, a man walked toward me from the trees, thin, rough, and older than the photos. He looked at me with tired eyes. "You a Lara?" he asked. I nodded. He sat down and tapped his cigarette against a rock. His voice was low. "I heard you were out." I asked him about Clara and Nathan. He looked down and said, "They took a lot. I helped them hide it." My throat closed. "Why would you do that?" He laughed, a small, bitter sound. "Because we get paid." He told me how Nathan had been reckless with money and how Clara had used him. "She needed him to make it look like she wasn't involved," he said. I felt a hot, fierce anger that made me shake. The man noticed and leaned in, whispering, "Be careful. People who dug holes don't like when you climb out." Behind him, the river moved on, taking secrets with it. Back at home, Clara smiled the same smile that had fooled a courtroom. She hugged me like a sister, but I felt nothing. I watched her carefully, her fingers, the way she checked her phone, the way she kept her lips too still. I pretended to be happy to be back, letting her believe I was broken. At night, I listened to the house creak and imagined the life I used to have. I told Dad I was okay, though his eyes said otherwise. I hid the motel man's notes in a jar on my shelf, small proof that I was not crazy. A week later, I got a message from an unknown number: "I can help you, but it'll cost you." My stomach dropped. The message had no name, only a time and a place. I knew then someone else was watching, someone who wanted something from me. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. That night, Clara came into my room while I pretended to sleep, and she whispered, "You don't have to dig any more." Her breath smelled like coffee and lies. I answered softly, "I already started." She pulled away, her face white. "Ilara, stop." I didn't stop. I only smiled, and the smile felt like frost. The meeting place was an old cafe near the edge of town, quiet except for the hum of old lights. I arrived early, heart thudding. 10 minutes later, a man in a dark coat sat across from me. He looked around before speaking. "Name's Derek," he said. "I used to work with Nathan and your sister." My pulse raced. "Why contact me?" I asked. He slid a small flash drive across the table. "Because Clara ruined me too. That thing has everything you need, emails, calls, recordings." I stared at it. "Why now?" He gave a small smile. "Because revenge is sweeter when you share it." Then he stood and left without another word. I turned the flash drive in my hand. It was small, harmless looking, but it felt heavy, like it held my whole life inside. Back home, I waited until midnight, locked my door, and plugged it into my old laptop. The screen blinked, and then there she was, Clara, laughing in a video. "She'll take the blame for us," she said, smiling to Nathan. "She always does." My chest clenched. I watched every second until my tears blurred the screen. When it ended, I sat still, empty. Then I backed up the files 3 times and whispered, "Now it's my turn." The next morning, I walked into the sunlight with a new kind of calm. The flash drive burned like a secret in my pocket. I went downtown and printed a few stills from the video, Clara's face, her words frozen mid-laugh. I didn't know what I would do yet, only that I couldn't rush. I watched her carefully that week. She had a perfect life now, nice house, fancy car, a husband named Mason who adored her, and a charity that made her look like a saint. I smiled through every dinner, every story, waiting. When she left for work, I followed her once. She met a woman behind a building and handed over a folder. When the woman left, I picked up a paper that fell, numbers, bank codes, fake names. Clara wasn't just guilty. She was still doing it. That night, I printed more photos and put one on her windshield with a single line written on it, "I know what you did." The next day, she came to my room, pale and trembling. "Someone's threatening me," she said. "Did you see anyone?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, but maybe they know the truth." She blinked hard and whispered, "Don't play games, Ilara." Mom decided we needed a family dinner. The table was covered in food, and everyone pretended we were normal. I sat across from Clara and smiled too much. Dad barely spoke. Mom tried to fill the silence with stories, but the air was heavy. Halfway through dinner, I leaned forward and said, "Do you remember the night I was arrested?" Everyone froze. Clara's fork slipped, clinking against her plate. "Why bring that up?" she asked. "Because I've been thinking about it," I said softly. "How calm you were." Her eyes darted toward Dad, who cleared his throat. "Let's not," he said. I ignored him. "You looked almost relieved." Clara's hand shook as she reached for her glass. "You're imagining things." I laughed quietly. "Maybe." The silence grew until even the clock stopped ticking. Finally, she stood, muttering, "I'm done with this." As she walked away, I said gently, "You look nervous, Clara." She stopped in the doorway but didn't turn around. "You should be," she said, then left. The air stayed thick long after she was gone. When I looked at Mom, she was staring at me, terrified, not of me but of what I might do next. The next few weeks, Clara pretended everything was fine. On social media, she smiled in photos beside her charity banner, Helping Hands. I started following the charity page quietly. I saw names I recognized, people from fintech, the same ones from the old files. The whole charity was a cover. I made copies of their fake donation logs, tracing the missing money. Mason, her husband, had no idea. He called me one evening. "She's been acting strange," he said. "Is everything all right between you two?" I paused, then said, "She just gets tired sometimes." He sighed. "She talks in her sleep," he murmured. "She says your name." That night, I watched her latest video online. She spoke about forgiveness, about how everyone deserves a second chance. The comments were full of love. I scrolled through them, my fingers shaking. The next day, an anonymous post appeared online, one of the photos from the flash drive with the caption, "St. Clara's mask is slipping." The story spread fast. Her charity's sponsors froze their funds. She called me, voice trembling, "Someone's spreading lies about me." I said, "Lies have a way of sounding true when they fit." Clara came to my room the next night, eyes red. "Stop this, Alara," she said. "Whatever you think you're doing, you're making a mistake." I leaned against the window, calm. "You made the first mistake years ago," I said. "You let me take your place." She stepped closer, whispering, "You don't know everything." I raised my brows. "Then tell me." Her lip trembled, but she said nothing. She turned to leave, then stopped. "If you keep this up," she said softly, "I'll tell Mom what really happened that night." I froze. "What are you talking about?" She smiled, but it was a sharp, frightened smile. "You think I acted alone?" My stomach twisted. "Who helped you?" I demanded. She only whispered, "Ask Dad again," and left. I stood there, my breath shaking, realizing that the hole I was digging led deeper than I thought. The next morning, I got another anonymous text, a photo of me and Clara as kids, with the words, "It always starts at home." I stared at it for a long time, the sun rising behind me, knowing I had just crossed a line there was no way back from. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara's words. "Ask Dad again." The phrase echoed in my head until it became poison. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep and searched through Dad's study. The air smelled like old paper and whiskey. In the bottom drawer, I found a locked box. I pried it open with a letter opener, hands shaking. Inside were files, contracts, emails, and a small hard drive labeled FinTech Backup. My pulse hammered as I plugged it into my laptop. There were bank statements showing large payments to a charity partner, Clara's Foundation. And hidden among them, an email chain between Dad and Nathan Hale. Dad had known everything. He had written, "Make sure Alara's name stays on the file. Clara can't handle this kind of pressure." My eyes burned as I read each line. My own father had offered me as a shield. I printed the emails and placed them in an envelope marked insurance. When I confronted him the next morning, he went pale. "Alara, it's over," he said quietly. "You're free now." I stared at him. I was never free. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, shaking, the man who had chosen silence over his daughter. I didn't plan to find an ally, but sometimes fate picks strange timing. Mason showed up at my door the next day, looking lost. "I know something's wrong," he said. "Clara's been lying. I can feel it." I studied him carefully. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. "What do you know?" I asked. He handed me a folder filled with receipts and transfer slips from the charity. "She's moving money overseas," he said. "Millions. I confronted her last night. She told me to keep quiet or she'd ruin me." I exhaled slowly. "She ruined me once," I said. He frowned. "What do you mean?" I told him everything, the prison, the betrayal, the recordings. His face turned white. "My God," he whispered. "You have proof?" I nodded. He sat back, rubbing his temples. "We can end this," he said. "But we have to be smart." That night we started planning. He knew the systems, I knew her weaknesses. Together we began to gather everything, documents, accounts, connections. For the first time I wasn't alone. When Mason left, he said quietly, "She won't see it coming." I looked out the window after he drove away and whispered, "She never does." Over the next week, Mason and I moved like ghosts. We met in quiet parking lots, exchanged information, and deleted our messages after each talk. Clara's world began to crack. Her charity donors backed out. Rumors about fraud spread online. Every post seemed to echo with her name. She tried to act strong, but her smile was stretched thin. Then one morning, a journalist called me. "I'm investigating your sister's charity," she said. "Someone sent us documents tying her to an old financial case." My heart jumped. "What kind of case?" I asked. 5 years ago," the woman said. "Something involving you." For a moment, the air vanished. "Do you want to comment?" she asked. I almost said no, but then I realized this was my chance to tell the truth. "I'll meet you," I said. That night, Mason and I reviewed the flash drive one last time. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "Once it's out, there's no undoing it." I nodded. "She took my life. I'm just taking back what's mine." The next morning, I opened my phone to a headline that made my knees weak. Clara's face filled the screen with the words, "Charity Queen accused of fraud and family betrayal." The calls came one after another. Reporters, lawyers, even old friends, all asking questions I'd waited years to hear. Clara's perfect world crumbled in hours. Mason told me she hadn't left the house all day. When she finally called me, her voice cracked. "Ilara, please listen." "Why?" I interrupted. "You had 5 years to tell the truth." She sobbed softly. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. Dad said it was the only way." I clenched my jaw. "You lied, Clara. You watched them destroy me." "I did it for the family," she cried. "You were stronger. You could survive it." I closed my eyes. "You don't get to decide that." She begged me to meet her to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. "Tomorrow," I said. "At the old house." "Thank you," she whispered. "You'll understand." After I hung up, Mason texted me, "Are you sure it's safe?" I typed back, "It's not supposed to be safe." That night, I packed the flash drive, the printed emails, and the recorder I used for proof. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew it had to. The old house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. Dust floated in the morning light. Clara stood by the window, her face pale, her hands shaking. "You came," she said softly. I closed the door behind me. "You wanted to talk." "Talk." She took a deep breath. "I did it. All of it. Nathan, the company, the money, it was me." I felt my knees weaken, but I stayed still. "Why?" I whispered. "Because I was tired of being second," she said, voice breaking. "Everyone loved you more. You got everything. I just wanted something that was mine." I laughed bitterly. "So you took my life?" She cried harder. "Dad told me it was just temporary. That he'd fix it later. But then it was too late." I stepped closer, my recorder hidden in my pocket. "You're sorry now because you got caught?" She shook her head. "No, because I lost you." Her tears hit the floor. I turned to leave but paused. "You didn't lose me," I said quietly. "You destroyed me." As I walked out, she didn't see the red light blinking in my pocket, every word, every confession saved. I drove straight to Mason's after leaving the old house. My hands were shaking, the recorder warm in my pocket. "She confessed," I said, breathless. Mason looked stunned. "You got it?" I nodded and played the recording. Clara's voice filled the room, trembling but clear. "I did it. All of it. Nathan, the company, the money, it was me." Mason leaned back, exhaling. "That's enough to bury her." But something inside me ached. My revenge was almost complete, yet I didn't feel free. "We'll send it to the press," he said. "Then to the police." I hesitated. "No," I said quietly. "I'll send it myself." That night, I walked to the same mailbox where I used to drop letters to my mother from prison. I sealed a flash drive, the recording, and the documents inside an envelope marked truth. My hand shook as I let it fall through the slot. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dark street. It was over, or it should have been. But deep down, I felt a strange pull, like something unfinished. I had my revenge, but the pieces of my old life didn't fit anymore. The next morning, the headline screamed, "Clara Quinn confesses in secret recording." The media storm exploded. Videos, interviews, radio shows, Clara's name was everywhere. Reporters camped outside her house. I stayed quiet, watching it all unfold. Mason called me often, worried. "She's breaking apart," he said. "She barely eats. She keeps saying your name." I felt no sympathy at first, only the dull satisfaction of justice. Then one evening, Mom showed up at my door. She looked smaller somehow. "You did this?" she asked softly. I nodded. "She deserved it." Mom sat down heavily. "So did we," she whispered. "We made you carry a burden that wasn't yours. But Ilara, revenge doesn't heal." I wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, but the words stuck. Mom started crying quietly. "She's still your sister," she said. "And I'm still your mother who failed both of you." After she left, I stood at the window, watching the night rain. For the first time, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Yet when I remembered the cell walls, the sleepless nights, and Clara's laughter in those videos, I told myself I'd only balanced the scales. Still, somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What now?" A week later, I got a message from an unknown number, "Meet me where it all began." I knew instantly it was Clara. Against all logic, I went. The old park where we used to play was empty except for her. She looked hollow, her eyes red. I guess you won, she said softly. It wasn't a game, I said. It was survival. She nodded. I'm turning myself in tomorrow. I can't run anymore. For a long moment we just stood there, two broken halves of a family. Then she said, Do you feel better now? I opened my mouth but couldn't answer. She gave a faint smile. That's what I thought. She handed me a small box. What's this? I asked. Something I kept from you, she said, walking away. When she disappeared into the fog, I opened it. Inside was a silver bracelet, mine from years ago. I hadn't seen it since the night I was arrested. On the inside was a tiny engraving, Forgive me. My throat tightened. I realized she had carried her guilt far longer than I imagined. The next morning, the police arrived at Clara's house. Cameras flashed as she was led away in handcuffs. She didn't resist. The image spread everywhere. Sister who framed her own blood finally faces justice. I watched it from my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hand. Mason texted, It's over. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, Is it? I went to visit Dad later that day. He looked older, gray and empty. She confessed, I said. He nodded slowly. We deserved this, he murmured. All of us. I turned to leave, but he stopped me. Ilara, will you ever forgive us? I didn't answer. Outside, I found Mom sitting in the garden, her eyes distant. It's quiet now, she said. Too quiet. I sat beside her, the silver bracelet in my hand. Maybe that's what peace sounds like, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew peace didn't come easy. It had a cost, and I had paid it in years I'd never get back. Months passed. Clara was sentenced to 7 years. The world moved on, but I couldn't. Some days I'd wake up expecting the clang of prison doors, the echo of my old cell. Other days I'd walk by the river and almost hear Nathan's voice in the wind. The past didn't let go, it only faded. One afternoon, Mason visited. They asked me to run the charity, he said. For real this time. Honest work. I smiled faintly. You should. Make something good out of all this. He looked at me. And you? I shrugged. I think I'll write. Maybe tell the story one day. When he left, I sat by the window, sunlight spilling across my desk. I took out a notebook and wrote the first line. She framed me, took my life, and thought I'd never find out. Then I paused, breathing deeply. She was wrong, I whispered to the empty room. But this time it wasn't anger, it was peace. The kind that comes not from revenge, but from finally being free. Please subscribe, comment, and like for more updates.